are in Clinchco concerning those things. Choir practice, if anyone is interested in choir practice, tomorrow night, Monday night at 6:30. We met last week and then decided Wednesday probably wasn't the best night, so we are going to be meeting on Mondays at 6:30. If you are available and are interested, come and join us, please. Hosea chapter 2 this morning. We are going to look at a situation in which God uses some things that you wouldn't think He would to accomplish His will. And as we work our way down through chapter 2 here, we are reminded that in the first chapter, the three children teach us about the grace of God. In chapter 2 here, Gomer teaches us about the holiness of God. And in the end of the chapter, Hosea is going to teach us about the love of God. And those two overlap a little bit, and you'll see that some today as we dig into this. Last week we spent quite a bit of time, and I think it's very important to do so, studying this concept, why do we blame God instead of blaming ourselves for the choices that we make? And today we're going to close that up, and we're going to go right into the second aspect of it, and you're going to see that sometimes God uses our sin and the revealing of our sin to encourage us to be better than we have been. And that's what He is going to do here in the life of Gomer. It's not always an easy situation, but it is a necessary situation before He gets to the really hard stuff where He disciplines us. The three concerns that we're going to be discussing, the one we almost finished last week is involved in idolatry, and then we're going to see they are overwhelmed by ingratitude, and next week we're going to see the hypocrisy of the whole thing. And we started in verse 2 here, and I'd like to read verse 2 down through verse 10 as we get started this morning. Plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. Lest I strip her naked and set her as in the day that she was born. Make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. And I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. For their mother hath played the harlot, she that conceived them hath done shamefully. For she said, I will go after my loves that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up the way with thorns and make a wall, that she shall not find her paths. And she shall follow after her lovers, but shall not overtake them. And she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband. For then was it better with me than now. For she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. Therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and will recover my wool and my flax given to cover her nakedness. And now will I discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, it is difficult when we read passages like this about your judgment. And sometimes we are so quick to question when we are having such a difficult time understanding. But we can look over and over and over again in your word and see that some of the greatest growing times were times of difficulty. In Job's life, it didn't have anything to do with sin. He didn't do anything wrong. Yet you tried and tested him so that he could come forth like pure gold. In the end, he said he knew you better than he had ever known you before. And sometimes you do judge because of sin. And we have to be reminded that you are a good and righteous and holy and just God. And I trust this morning that you would help us to look into our hearts, consider ourselves, and see ourselves spent the whole time last week dealing with verse 2 and finishing it up. And it is a difficult and a challenging thing because it really strikes to our heart. Here we see a ruined relationship. He is not the husband and they are not the wife. Marriage is a picture of all these things that are supposed to happen, and God says that's not the way things are happening because you have gone astray. He uses this very clear picture of whoredoms, idolatry, and he says there are some things that need to happen. And there are two phrases here at the end of verse 2 that are very important. The first one, put away her whoredoms out of her sight. What is important about something being in your sight? Listen, you do not bow down or worship an idol when it is not in your sight. What he is referring to here is a very particular reference to the actions and the attitudes that are involved with what the nation of Israel is doing. He's saying, why do you elevate this thing before me? Why is it so important in your life? Why do you give it precedence in the things that you do in your daily living? Now, there's no way we have the time to go back and look at a couple of the verses from last week. But last week we looked at some verses where the nation of Israel took the things that God meant for good and used them to make an idol. And he's saying, why in your life are you giving this preeminence? If you are going to turn from your sin, the first thing you have to do is you have to remove it out of your sight. David said, let no wicked thing be before mine eyes. It cannot have preeminence, or it starts to affect my actions. The second phrase is one that might be easily misunderstood. It says, in her adulteries from between her breasts. Listen, if something is going to get that close to you, it is something that is what? Dear to you. You are clinging to it. It didn't take very long in warfare for them to figure out African nations, because of the heat, used to run around with a loincloth and spears, and they'd carry a shield to protect themselves. And just about anybody that went down there and wanted to conquer them didn't have a hard time conquering them because they had no protection. They had no breastplate. Well, one of the big difficulties for our military is they go over to the Middle East and it's 100 and some degrees and they're wearing body armor. But you know what? It doesn't matter how hot it gets. Those guys, until they are in an area that is considered safe, do not unzip and take off their body armor. Why? Because they are protecting what is near and dear to them. And he is using a phrase here, and he is saying, not only do you have to it, stop clinging to it. Two phrases that I have read that are very interesting. We will have revival in our country when we really want it.
Amen.
It's true. We're not going to have revival until we really want it. If it is not near and dear to us, if we are not willing to spend time in prayer, if we are not willing to spend time in God's Word, if we're not willing to go out and talk to our neighbors about the love of God, we're not going to have revival in this country as long as there's something else that's more important, that is near and dear, that is more emotionally attached to us than revival. We'll never see it in our country. But the other thing that's interesting is you will only put away your sin when you stop loving it. You cannot deal with your sin until you see it for what God sees it for and recognize that you cannot love it, you cannot cling to it, it cannot be intimate to you, and still deal with it as you ought to. Turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 in verse 8. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. Things were not always going well in the spread of the gospel, and here we have some insight as they are writing back to the church of Thessalonica. And he says here, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you, not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because you were dear unto us. Listen, when you are passionate about the things of God, you don't have time to be passionate about the things that aren't of God. Idolatry is simply when we love something else with the love that we are supposed to demonstrate to God. And in 1 Thessalonians, they're writing to them and say, listen, the church there started growing because we didn't just come in and haphazardly share the gospel. We poured out our heart to you. You want to make a difference in somebody's life? It's not what you say. It's the emotion behind what you say. Do you love the person? That's what he's saying here. Idolatry often involved immorality, and the same is true today. It is the result of a reprobate mind. Baal is the rain god. And so, let's go back to Hosea chapter 2, and in verse 3, we're going to see that this idolatry becomes exposed. Lest I strip her naked and set her as in the day that she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. You say, what in the world are you talking about? God has clothed the nation of Israel. And now he is saying, I am going to strip her naked, as in the day that I chose Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees. Why did he choose Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees? Was there anything special about him? Did the nations around him fear Abram at that time? Was he a mighty and great nation? Was there anything really to talk about? No. God says maybe we need to go back to the roots to show you how you got here, instead of attributing all of this to something else. In Deuteronomy, well, let's go there. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. And then I'll give you a couple of other verses. We don't have time to look them all up. Deuteronomy 7:6 says, But this shall ye deal with them, ye shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. When we have something else in God's place, it is a slap in his face. When I trusted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, it wasn't because I was pursuing God. It's because God was passionately pursuing me. I wasn't worthy of it. I didn't deserve it. There was nothing special about me. My spiritual anniversary is coming up. Second Wednesday night of July in 1976 was my Independence Day. I remember being at camp, and I was excited for being there. Had a difficult time choosing between soccer camp and running camp. Both were at the same place. I could run and run and run when I was a youngster. I could run down the course. I could start running, and 8 miles later, it'd be no big deal to me. I used to do it for fun. Stupid. My friend lived like 7 miles away. It was about 4.5 miles if you went up over the mountain and down the other side to his place. You're wasting playtime if you stroll. It'd take you all day to get there, so I'd run. And I remember getting to camp, and I was so excited because we were going to do this running, and they were going to teach you about kick and breathing techniques and arm swing and all these things that are important to be able to maintain your speed and to be able to maintain your stamina for a great distance. And I got sick. Man, I was so sick to my stomach. I picked up a stomach bug, spent 3 days sick as a dog, couldn't keep anything down. And the whole time I lay in my bunk, I listened to the cook downstairs sing about the grace and glory of God. I remember that Wednesday night, sitting there in church. I don't know who was speaking. I have no idea what he was speaking about, but on that Wednesday night, what he was speaking about and what she had been singing about for 3 days met. And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit illuminated my heart. Listen, evangelism is one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. And sometimes we start thinking we are so high and mighty, we are so something special. God says, am I going to have to strip you down like it was before you get busy doing what you ought to be doing? He clothed Israel. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 11. By the way, in Deuteronomy, if you want to see about choosing Israel, Deuteronomy 14:2 and 16:11 are also verses, very passionate verses about God, about how God feels about choosing the nation of Israel. But in in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 11. Hath the nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods, but my people have changed their glory for that which doth not profit. What was the nation of Israel's glory? Worshiping the Lord, following his law. Go to chapter 9, Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 23 and 24. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches. Now hold on a minute, because most of the time when you see an incredible nation, that's what you think about, right? Their wisdom, and you think about their might, and you think about their riches, their gross national product, and God says, you don't glory in those things. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. What was the glory of the nation of Israel? That they were his chosen people. Their laws were different than the laws of other people. The way they conducted themselves was different from the way other folks conducted themselves. The way they treated each other was supposed to be different, based on what God had told them from his word. He sustained Israel. We don't have time to go there, but it took him to a land flowing with milk and honey, and we talked about that last week. And in Hosea, he uses this interesting term at the end of the verse. And he says, and I will slay her with thirst. I want you to turn to two passages in Isaiah real quickly and see what he's talking about here. In Isaiah chapter 41, verse 17. We don't often think in these terms, so when you hear something like that, it's kind of foreign to us. Isaiah 41, verse 17, he's talking about a time of judgment, and he says, when the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. You can see in verse 19, I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. After all, isn't that what happened as they were in the wilderness wandering? You get all these people walking around all these beasts, and they're in the middle of a dry space, and they have nothing to drink. And everybody's griping and complaining. You know, when we go back to Egypt, God tells Moses, I got a better idea. Rather than going back and being slaves, why don't you just allow me to provide for you? Can I just show up today? Would that be okay with everybody? And he asked Moses to go up and strike the rock. Now, I don't know about you. I've hit rocks before. I've broke them and done all kinds of things. I've never had a river of water come out of one. And there they are, no reasonable expectation, a picture of God's provision. He strikes the rock and water comes pouring out of it. And the amazing thing to me is they're just gorging themselves with water, but I don't see a great deal of appreciation for what God has done. And a little bit later, it happens a second time, and Moses gets so frustrated because he's probably thinking, no, wait a minute. Deja vu, we've done this before. You are in a dry and thirsty land. Why are you not looking at God as preeminent in your life? Is he really going to have to bring water from a rock a second time? Yeah, you better believe he is. He sustains us. Go back to Hosea chapter 2. Look at verse 4. I will not have mercy upon our children, for they be the children of whoredoms. Now that sounds harsh, right? I mean, God's love and all that kind of stuff. What in the world? Listen, what he is saying is, you cannot expect me to bless the fruits of sin. He can't do it. That's right. He can't have anything to do with it. So if you continually make choices that are against him, when you are reaping reaping the consequences, and you drop down on your knees and you ask God to change those consequences, He's saying, wait a minute. I can't bless the children for Him. How does that work? Turn with me to John chapter 8. Because Jesus Christ addresses the exact same situation. And He is addressing it to righteous people. At least they think they're righteous. Look at verse 31. Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on Him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered Him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? Now, you see what they're doing? They are so proud of the fact that they are of Abraham's seed. So, object lesson time. Jesus says, you want to talk about Abraham's seed? Let's talk about Abraham's seed. Jesus answered them, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. Do you see what He's saying? I can't bless the children of whoredoms. I can't bless the fruit of sin. And the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my Father, and ye do that which we have seen with whoredom. Do you see it? He's still addressing it in Jesus' day. They're a little confused. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. Now, doesn't that just make sense? I'll bet that stroked fear into somebody's heart. What? You're accusing me of not being a good Jew? It's exactly what he says. Look at verse 41. Ye do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, we be not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. Jesus said unto them, if God were your Father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from God, neither came I of myself, but He sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because ye cannot hear my word? Ye are of your father, what?
The devil.
Children of whoredom. And the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. You talk about him getting mad. They're standing here saying, we've never been in bondage. Really? Abraham's kids have never been in bondage? I'm thinking Egypt. I mean, how quickly we forget. And here they are saying, you're talking to us like we're sinful, filthy Gentiles. We're the children of Abraham. And you say, you want to know who your real father is? Your children of whoredom. Your father is Satan. You think like him, act like him, live like him. And that's why you can't stand me. What a slap in the face to all these Jewish people who are trotting on up to the temple and standing there all self-righteous, thinking they're really something. No wonder they wanted to kill him. They just met a different measuring stick, didn't they? Self-righteousness can't stand up before the holy, righteous Son of God, and that's exactly what Hosea is dealing with all the way back in this chapter. God says, I can't bless the children of whoredoms. You're not even acting like my children. I'm not your husband. She's not my mother. And now these children are something that I can't even recognize. God cannot condone sin, bless sin, ignore sin. He must deal with it. Now look at verse 5. Hosea chapter 2, verse 5, he says, for their mother hath played the harlot. She that conceived them hath done shamefully, for she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. In verse faithful city become a harlot. It was full of judgment, righteousness lodged in it. But now, murderers. And that's exactly what he's dealing with here. You say, how does Jerusalem become this city where holiness and righteousness was supposed to abound? Well, if you will look at the second half of verse 5, you see that Hosea says, you are attributing what God has given you in your regular blessings to something that Baal has done. You are claiming that your lovers, these idols, have given you your bread, your water, your wool, your flax, your oil, and your drink. Those are the basic necessities of life he's talking about here. Israel's actions. I will go after my lovers. He is talking about passionate pursuit. You see that? I will go after. This isn't some casual thing that happens. This isn't a mistake. This isn't I didn't know better. Gang, when we sin, it's not because we were ignorant of it. It's because we consciously made the choice to do it. We decided that we were going to make a choice, and choices have consequences. Notice the term, because it's interesting. I looked it up. Lovers. It's plural. It's not just a mistranslation. I will be your God. One God. I will pursue my lovers. Not just one case of idolatry, multiple cases of idolatry. I'm going to worship the rain god. I'm going to worship this God. I'm going to worship this God, and this God, and this God, and this God. And God's saying, but all these heathen nations around them don't change their glory. They're not leaving their gods to go after. Why are you leaving the one true God to go after something that isn't satisfying them? It's interesting to me because Baal is the rain god. Now, let's get some real perspective on this. How deep an offense is this to God? We got to go there. Deuteronomy chapter 11. Deuteronomy chapter 11. This is before they go into the promised land. Okay? Starting in verse 8. Deuteronomy 11, verse 8. Therefore shall ye keep all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye may be strong and go in and possess the land whither ye go to possess it. He is preparing them for the land flowing with milk and honey. And that ye may prolong your days in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give unto them and to their seed, a land that floweth with milk and honey. For the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not as the land of Egypt from whence ye came out, where thou sowest thy seed and water stick with thy foot as a garden of herbs. You say, I don't get it. Listen, things don't grow well in Egypt unless you what? Irrigate them. You know what he said? He said, unless thou waterest them with thy foot. You would have to sit there by one of the tributaries and pump, like the old sewing machines, to sit there and pump the water to water the crops. You keep saying while you're in the wilderness, you want to go back to Egypt. Oh, I wish I had some leeks. I wish I had some melons. Do you not remember that you used to sit in the 100-degree weather and pump and pump and pump to grow those leeks and melons? God says, do you realize that in the land of Canaan, you don't have to sit there and pump water? I pump it for you. It's called rain. Let's keep reading. But the land whither you go possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven. A land which the Lord thy God careth for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. Do you see what he's telling them? He's telling them, I take care of the rain. I made this an abundant land. You are going to flourish in this place. Okay? Now, let's fast forward to 1 Kings chapter 16. 1 Kings chapter 16. This is going to look really familiar to you. Starting in verse 29. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab the son of Omri to reign over Israel, and Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. We looked at this in Sunday school, right? And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took to his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal, and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. Baal's the rain god. Talked about a slap in the face. God said, you're not going to have to sit there and pump like you did in Egypt to water your crops. I am going to make it rain, and this is going to be a prosperous land. Here we are in 1 Kings chapter 16. The nation of Israel just keeps wandering away from God, so God starts withholding the rain. And Ahab builds an altar to Baal, and then he turns around and he builds a house of Baal, a temple, a counterfeit to what is in Jerusalem. What happens 2 chapters later in 1 Kings chapter 18? Does anybody know? Yep. But what happens in chapter 17? Look at 17 verse 1. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was in the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be you messed with the wrong dude. You want to worship Baal? You want to build him a temple? You want to get hundreds and hundreds of priests together? You have it. But I'm telling you right now, Baal is not the answer. Hosea says, pursued after her lovers. And that's exactly what Ahab's doing. But is it fulfilling? Nope. Gentle reminder, listen, the judgment's coming. You better wake up. You better wake up. 3 years later, it has not rained. Can you believe it? Can you imagine the stubbornness of the human heart, the hardness of a heart rankled by sin? 3 years of no rain, not a drop. No dew, no rain. Can you imagine the calamity that these folks are in, and they still will not humble themselves? Chapter 18. Elijah goes up to Mount Carmel. You ever wonder why they had to walk all the way down to the sea to get barrels of water? Because there's no dew and it hasn't been raining. Listen, it should have been a really easy thing for Baal to come down and consume the sacrifice that all those priests were putting up there. Everything's powder dry. I mean, it doesn't take a big bolt of lightning to catch something on fire. They haven't had rain. And to make a statement, Elijah says, why don't you walk all the way down to the sea, which, by the way, is a further walk than it used to be because there hasn't been any rain for 3 years. And they get barrels of water, and they put them on their shoulder, and they haul them all the way up there, and they pour them on the sacrifice. And he says, do it again. Can you imagine how hot and dry it must have been? And those fellows walk all the way back down there, and they fill it. They poured water all over that thing. There's water soaking into the ground because the ground is as dry as it can be. And he digs a ditch, and they pour water on until no longer is the ground sucking up the water, but they filled the trench. And then he prays, and God rains down fire and licks up the water. And I would imagine there were a lot of people who were standing up there on top of Mount Carmel in the heat thinking, I'd like to have a lick of that. Because it's hot and dry. God told Hosea, I'm fixing to give you a land where you're really going to know what thirst is. Because I verse 7 of Hosea chapter 2. Verse 6, sorry. God's response. We're going to have to close here before too long, but I'm going to give you some homework for next week. God is going to respond 3 times here in Hosea chapter 2. I'm going to even give you the verses. This is like an open book exam. Y'all, I know it's summer and you don't want to work, so I'm going to make it easy for you. Verse 6, verse 9, and verse 14 all start with the same word. Nation of Israel is doing something, and God says, therefore will I. I will therefore. He is forced to respond. And you see here in verse 6 it says, therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns, and make a wall that she shall not find her path. Hedge of thorns. Can I share a little contrast? And we're not going to turn there. If you want to turn there this afternoon, read this passage and then read Job chapter 1. In Job chapter 1, Satan is wandering about, and God says to him, hey, Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none so righteous in all the earth. And Satan's response to God is very interesting. He says, well, yeah, it's really easy for him to be a righteous man, considering thou hast put a hedge of thorns about him. Now, isn't it funny that in Job chapter 1, the hedge of thorns provided a situation in which they allowed Job to what? Be successful. Right? I mean, you cannot read the book of Job without reading how successful he was. He has a large family, he is well thought of in his community, he is a godly individual, and he is wealthy. The least important is the fact that he is wealthy. But here, God says, I will put a hedge of thorns about you, and it is not protection that allows you success. It actually prevents success. Do you see what it says? I will hedge up thy way with thorns and make a wall that she shall not find her paths. So here's the picture. The nation of Israel doesn't want to attribute to God the things that he has been doing to provide for her. And they're started, worshiping Baal and Moloch and all these other different things. And he says, you are in full-blown pursuit of this idolatry. I am going to put a hedge of thorns about you. The faster and the harder and the more you pursue, the less fulfilling it is. And the more needy you become. And you want to know what scares me? That describes the country that I live in today. And we're getting ready to celebrate her birthday. But there are people who are waving flags and they're doing all kinds of stuff in passionate pursuit of that which is diametrically opposed to God and His Word. Arguing about how late it's okay to kill babies and euthanasia and all kinds of things. You expect God to be able to bless the USA? You could say the same thing about us. I cannot bless the children of Florida. I'm going to have to put a hedge about you and prevent you from being successful in your sin. The last thing he says is a wall. I am going to circumvent your effort. I am going to frustrate your efforts at folly. Now, we're not going to get political. But isn't it kind of weird that we get all bent out of shape over this person and this person and this person, but then we have folks who have molested folks that are running for president and nobody says a word? We passed a bill a couple of years ago forcing every American to pay for health care whether they wanted it or not, and they just voted, hasn't gone all the way through yet, but they just voted in one branch to give free health care to illegal aliens. We'll tax you if you you don't pay, you get it for free. What? What? How dare you keep people at the border? Children could be dying. And in a debate later that day, you're going to talk about how late you can kill those children? Folks, is there not a hedge of thorns while we passionately pursue corruption? I would hate to know the depths of the lying and the deceit that are at all levels of government, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? How in the world can God bless? But before I go pointing my bony finger at somebody in Washington or somebody in the State House, God bless things if my heart is contrary to His Word. If my values and my actions are passionately pursuing something other than Him, it's idolatry. We don't have time to finish this morning. We'll finish next week. Let's bow forward with prayer. Father, touch our hearts. Help us to be honest with ourselves. Help us to be honest before you. Help us to value you and to value the things of your word. I so badly want to hear when I stand before your Son